Chair, to work and then ask those I want to introduce themselves.
Okay. Thank you and welcome to Resources Under Scrutiny Committee meeting Thursday, 10th of February 2022. Notice of recording. Can I advise that this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site, and that members of the press public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. Apologies, I have two apologies from Councillor Jenkins and Councillor Berry.
Your Chair, apologies for Councillor Barbara Drink and Councillor Shafiq Shah.
Yeah.
Is Councillor Drink still in hospital? No, she's home now.
She's on, but
She's living outside. Needs help. Okay.
I
think we ought to recognise that,
yeah.
And if you'd be kind enough on behalf of the committee chairman to...
Yes, we will. We wish her well and a speedy recovery, and hope she gets well and you know back mobile again.
Chair, if she is better for next month, is it possible we can include her on the online so she can join online as opposed to coming in person?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Sorry, just on that point, she would be able to observe online.
Yeah.
She wouldn't be able to take any full part of the discussion. Just to be clear, it's something that we take to CPN as well.
Right.
Okay. If that's been taken to CPN, at least she'll get to keep staying in the loop.
Yeah. Declaration of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in the agenda item. Any declaration will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Action notes from the meetings held 25th of November and 20th of January. Noted, yeah? Great. Thank you. Before I move on to agenda item 5, just like to remind everybody that in person, here I've got Jane, Christian, Councillor Majid Mahmood, Councillor Paul Tilsley. Can I ask all on the hybrid to introduce themselves, please? We'll start with Rebecca.
Sorry, can you just repeat that, Chair? Sorry.
Just want everybody who's joined us on hybrid to actually introduce yourselves.
And an apology because my official background's got my interim title on it. So I'm Rebecca Hellard. I'm Director of Council Management, Section 151.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Pitt, Director of Finance. I'm the Deputy Section 151 Officer.
Lisa.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Lisa Taylor. I'm the Interim Head of Financial Planning.
Tristan.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Tristan Chatfield, Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources.
Okay, Mohammed Sajid.
Mohammed Sajid, Interim Head of Capital Treasury and Financial Reporting.
Okay, Richard.
Richard Pearce, Finance Manager on the Financial Strategy team.
Thank you, Meena.
Hello, I'm Meena Kishnani. I'm the Interim Transformation Director.
Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to agenda item 5, financial monitoring, Q3, month 9. Over to you, Tristan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As members obviously will be familiar with this format, this is the standard monthly report. We've obviously reached month 9 now, and obviously this went to Cabinet earlier in the week as well. So this report sets out a £4.2 million overspend, which is a significant improvement, and the direction of travel remains good, and I'm confident we'll get to 0 at the end of the year. And we've made substantial progress over the last couple of months with regards to that. Speaking of progress, we're also now set to deliver 86% of our savings target. Again, we're confident that this number will increase, but again, it shows we are moving in the right direction. And again, that puts us, the 86% puts us in line with the last couple of years, and is obviously a substantial improvement on where we were before that as well. And as I said, I'm confident we're going to be able to move that position further as well. there's a couple of key movements in this report, which I think is worth mentioning at this stage. One of them is the use of 6.1 million of financial resilience reserve to cover off issues around home to school transport. Members will be aware of the difficulties we've had around home to school transport, and we did flag this as a risk that was likely to emerge last time we were here. And this is essentially the sort of codification of that risk. So that risk has come out and been quantified now at 6.1 million. There's also an additional 3.3 million being used to cover the cost of the termination of the North Birmingham travel contract. Again, members will be aware. I don't think there's much argument that was the right decision to take. However, that decision did have a financial consequence, and it's right, therefore, we find the funding to close off that gap, and it's up to 3.3 million. We're still working on the exact details, so it's not fully reflected in the MTFP yet, but will be once we've properly quantified the exact cost. And also, just members of interest, for members' interest, the report also outlines the COVID impact we're still facing of around 22.8 million from income loss, and that's primarily driven by a number of factors, including things like car parking and sort of impact on leisure services, amongst other things. So just to give an indication about how we're still struggling with COVID, and also an expenditure on COVID of some 14.9 million as well. So that's our cost outlay as well. And with that, I think I'll hand over to you, Chair. One last thing. I think hopefully you've had the queries raised at the last meeting. You would have had the responses circulated. I think there's one still outstanding around CAS and mitigations in place for fleet and waste vehicles entering the clean air zone. I think the response to that is still being worked up, and we'll of course share that as soon as we get it.
Okay, thanks, Christian. Members?
Yeah, Chair, I've got a couple of questions. I'll ask the first three.
Okay.
That's okay. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, Tristan, you said that 86% of the savings targets have been realised. So clearly we're moving in the right direction for this time of the financial year. So, you know, well done to the officers and yourself as well, putting the council in a very good position. On the report 1.4, I'm very supportive of the spend controls that were implemented last year. I know that £100,000 spend has been avoided, and there's a further 300,000 has been avoided around, I think it was reduction in agency staff around Christmas time. So my question really is, how much were we, what was envisaged at the outset of these spend controls in savings to avoid expenditure from the outset? And, has that extra burden on officers created extra bureaucracy for them, or in terms of resources spent? And 1.8, the question that I've asked the last few meetings now, do we have any update on the national pay award? Has that now gone through, and is everything now been settled with the trade unions? And 1.12, this one I'm still trying to get my head around, so I need some help on this. It says that the underspend in the environmental improvements and cleanliness budget of 0.9 million, but we agreed 7.2 million additional resources for street cleansing and other environmental improvements. So I can't fathom where this 0.9 million underspend is. Thank you, Chair.
Who's going to come in, Tristan?
Yeah, thanks, Magic, for those questions. Yes, sorry, thanks, Chair. So I cut over you there. And thanks, Magic. The audio isn't the best, so I struggled with the last one a little bit. But so in terms of the spend controls, obviously the objective of those spend controls was to make sure we got to zero at the end of the year. In terms of the impact, I'll probably more question for service areas. It certainly has been. There is a process in place, and obviously that does create some degree of bureaucracy around this. But I think it's worth doing for the sake of the saving that we're aiming to get to. And as yet, I haven't been made aware of any service implications for that in terms of anything that the public would see in terms of pressure. In terms of the National Pay Award, the latest I had was still hadn't been agreed or confirmed, so we're still waiting formally. I think a couple of the unions have balloted, and I think as far as I'm aware, those ballots were unsuccessful in terms of supporting strike action, so obviously their options now are fairly limited. I would say there is an issue here that's been brought to my attention around the introduction of the NI charge change. So there is a risk because of not being able to implement the pay deal as we would normally do, and it's been delayed, that means that there is a risk that a lot of staff, the extra additional pay they're going to receive is going to be caught up in that NI increase. So actually there is a risk that some of our staff are going to lose out, not just us, but across the board in terms of local government, simply because of the delay of implementing that pay settlement. So it is a problem and one we're keeping an eye on, but it's not really in our gift to control, unfortunately. Obviously, I'm hoping the government will see sense and find a more progressive tax approach rather than just increasing NI for our workers again. In terms of the underspend, I didn't catch that. Sorry, Magic, can you repeat that question? I didn't quite catch it. The 0.9 million underspend.
0.9 million underspend on the waste. 1.12. If you have a look at that in the notes.
Yeah, I think that might be a case that we need to get. That might be a case that we need to come back with further details on that one, I think. It may just be, normally these things are simply because it takes a little while to get projects up and running, and therefore you have a sort of slippage on introduction, which might be the case on this one. But we haven't got an officer from the service here, but we can certainly get detail from the finance business partner on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, obviously home to school transport is a concern with the additional costs, and it's an issue I've raised previously, and that is the reduction in income, which is beginning to tell. Loss of income, particularly as a result of COVID, from car parking and additional services that we've provided. But there's also the additional problem of loss of income from council tax and business tax that I know we've discussed in the past, but it is a real pressure on the budget. And although I know that 86% of the savings have been implemented, there's still 14% to go, and we're at the beginning of February. So it all leads me on to Becky's prudent reserves of £38.5 million, which she is resolutely defending, and given the loss of income and the savings still to be implemented, is Becky still confident that those prudent reserves will be protected?
Chair, I'm happy to answer the one.
Yeah, carry on, Becky.
Okay, so if you remember a couple of years ago when we got here, we increased the general fund to 4.5%. That's how we got the 38.5, which is best practice. So you'd expect us to want to do that. On top of that, as you know, we've got the Finance Resilience Reserve. And every year, and you'll see it in the medium-term financial plan that's been published and went to Cabinet, we go through a whole analysis of every financial risk that we can see on the horizon, and we've involved the whole organisation in that. We quantify it, we apply a probability factor, and you then get the resultant completely quantified risks that we absolutely think will hit us at some stage, probably not altogether. Well, hopefully not altogether, but even if they did, we make sure that our financial resilience reserve covers all of that risk quantification. I can't remember which appendix it is in the financial plan, but somebody on the call might be able to tell me. So if you have a look at that, you'll see why we feel very assured that we have sufficient reserves there. Now, the reserves are not there to compensate for not delivering savings. That's not the idea of the reserves. They're there to cover specific risks, and we would never use reserves because we could not deliver savings. At the end of the day, the savings are one element of balancing the budget. We are legally required by the year end to balance our budget, and we're absolutely on course to do that, hence all the spend controls. You know, at Q2 it was over 10 million, Q3 we're down to 4.2. We've already moved on, you know, and these spend controls are managed on a weekly basis. So we absolutely will balance the budget by the year end, and we would never ever use reserves for that purpose. But do have a look at that appendix, because I think it's quite insightful in these are all the financial risks. This is how we calculate the probability of them hitting. This is how it equates to the level of the financial resilience reserve, which is over and above the general fund. A lot of authorities do not have finance resilience reserves. Okay, this was deliberately created because we are a very, very complex and large organisation with a very challenging agenda, you know, and ahead of us for the city, really, as well as for the organisation. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps. You must forgive me because I always term a councillor's responsibilities as to which way you're sitting on the horse.
Hopefully forwards.
Well, you are sitting on forwards if you're a member of the cabinet or you've got special responsibilities like Tristan. In resources, I always typified, if you'll forgive me, on the other way round. Right. We are sitting where the horse has been, and we're not able to guide the horse in the direction that we want. All we can do is to try and act as a safeguard as to potential problems that are coming along. And, you know, if you've got to make savings of £5 million at the beginning of the year, you've got 12 months to do it. If you haven't done it, you've got 9 months to do it. If you haven't done it, you've got 6 months to do it. If you haven't done it, you've got 3 months to do it. We're down to 2 months now. Yeah. And that's why I'm just flying the flag and asking the questions of the other 14%, basically.
Yeah, and I totally understand that, councillor. So do we as you'll see in the medium-term financial plan, you know, the delivery of that percentage is increased already because of the timings of the reports. It's 86% is the highest in the last 5 years. It's not good enough. It needs to be 100%, but it's heading in the right direction. But the spend controls compensate for the overall position. So hence why we've got them across property, the establishment. So that's, you know, and any employees being recruited or interims being extended, etc., all of that. And you know, that's a massive priority with our shift to permanency on employment. So and on the property side, we're absolutely down to only spend where it's health and safety required on buildings, and then across all of our procurement as well, or buying of supplies and services. So we have those rigorous processes in place, and this is reporting at 4.2 million. We know that I think the latest tab was that we're bringing that down to nearer 2 million now, and it will be zero by the end of the year.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was in a briefing session this week on children's services, and I've seen their next, I think it was 3 or 4 year plan. We're doing some fantastic work on home to school transport and send. I know they're taking on quite a number of permanent positions, you know, rather than interim. Have we actually looked at that far ahead on children's services on the budget side of it? And have we catered for it?
So, I mean, Sarah can give you more in depth. What I'd say is that the whole period of the medium-term financial plan, we've done all of the rigour behind it, looking at all the pressures, looking at all income levels, looking at inflation, everything. All of the work that we do for next year's budget, we do for the whole period of the medium-term financial plan. Okay, and remember now, well, this last year we started, or the year we're just finishing now, we started doing quarterly formal updates of the medium-term financial plan. The year before that, we did a 6-monthly update. We will continue with this whole rolling forecast and updating the whole of the medium-term financial plan on a quarterly basis. So you'll see the next quarters, the first quarter of 22-23 coming into the July cabinet. So any changes that, you know, and obviously our finance business partners are out there immersed in the services, including children's, you know, all of the time. We will be updating those. We update them monthly, and then formally whole of the medium-term financial plan is updated, as well as giving quarterly in-year financial monitors. So all of those years will be updated on a quarterly basis now. That is way over and above what most local authorities do, but we believe it's best practice and what we should be doing.
Okay, thanks for that. Your questions? Members?
Can I just come in quickly on Councillor Tills's point, if I can?
Yeah.
I was just going to make the point about, I think I take his point about sort of traditional, maybe local government finance was very backward facing, and I think that's a pretty accurate description of where we were a few years ago. But I think we can be much more sophisticated than that, and I think we are approaching a position where we're becoming much more sophisticated. We can use data and information to make sure that we can predict service demand and pressure coming forward, and then we can quantify that in terms of finances. It's never going to be perfect, but I think we can go a long way towards getting a much more stable long-term view. We're developing, we're hopefully going to end up developing a 25-year capital strategy, and that's obviously a very, very long-term view, but will give us real stability and forward planning around capital and how we finance that capital. But also we can do things, and I think Children's Trust is actually a very good example of this, and adults, where you can use all the data that we have as an organisation, which is vast, and if you can use that data in a sophisticated, intelligent way, you can make some pretty strong forward projections about our finances. What would help with all of this is if the government gave us the certainty of a longer term financial settlement. And I keep banging the drum for this, and I suspect I may never be successful, but I'm going to carry on anyway, is that if government did give local government the certainty of something like a 5-year settlement, that would put us all in a much better position of being able to plan and project forward, and then determine our revenue needs, our capital needs, and everything, all the requirements we're going to have, and what we're going to need to do to raise income and things like that. But we've never had that degree of certainty, certainly not in the time I've been involved anyway. And I'd like to get us to that point. But actually, I think we can be. I think we've tried to stretch your horse analogy out. I think it's possible that you can look more forward than we are backwards, and I think that's the position we're going towards, which I think we can all agree, if you're trotting along on a horse, is a better place to be.
Kristen, you are in a position, having your hands on the reins, to be able to guide the horse. All that we can do as mere members of a scrutiny committee is to see where the horse has been and occasionally give it a slap on the thighs.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple more questions.
Yeah, sure, Councillor Mahmood.
Yeah, just on the capital expenditure 2.3, it's in relation to relocation of Montague Street and Redfern Street depots. I think it's referred to as the Atlas Works project. I know that £400,000 has been allocated recently in last month, and that there's a further report coming to Cabinet. So can we just have an assurance that we have got, the project is now fully costed? And 2.36, there's a slippage 5 million in the property strategy. I'm assuming that's around the public health programme. I also know again that it states in the report that the property strategy will be coming to Cabinet in the municipal year 2022-23. I'm just wondering if that's something that scrutiny could get involved in from this end to assist the Cabinet member in that piece of work. And final question, just on 3.22, I'm still trying to get my head around the figures on this, so if someone can help me. It says there's an improvement of 3 million in street scene within city operations, and despite a loss of a large contract and trade waste with NHS around £400,000, there's an underspend of £800,000 on the waste disposal contract, £800,000 additional income from mixed recyclates and electricity, £900,000 in the delay of environmental cleanups, which was my previous question. I think we've got to the bottom of that now. And there's £400,000 in revenue costs capitalised within the transformation strategy. That makes it 2.9 million in savings, but we've lost the £400,000 NHS contract and £300,000 in a contractual settlement. So if my figures are right, that means trade waste have brought in additional income of £800,000, and if they have, that's been really well done to that particular service there, and hoping they will get some form of recognition for that, if that's correct. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Cabinet member, Kristen?
Yeah, so I was just looking at the report. I'll get some. We'll get some more detail on the trade and race position. Clearly, the loss of the contract is significant and disappointing, and I think it probably reflects the difficult commercial market that it's currently operating in. Where that sits exactly in terms of the figures presented, I'll have to check and get back to you if that's all right. In terms of property, I think it would be worth this committee having a look at property. Obviously, we've got our new director. I forget the name of the director he is now in charge of.
Paul Kitson.
Paul Kitson, in charge of inclusive growth, who I think has come from a Homes England background, and I think will be able to make a really strong contribution towards this agenda. And I think maybe it'd be worth the committee inviting him in at some point to have a discussion about the sort of the financial and resource implications of where he might want to take that directorate in terms of future use, because there is this big challenge in the delivery programme around better use of our assets, and that's absolutely critical to closing off the gap in future financial years. And obviously his directorate is going to play a big role in doing that. So absolutely, I think that'd be definitely worth bringing.
Happy with that? Paul, happy with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 6. We've got Maina. Do you want to take us through Invest to Save initiatives, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say that I am representing Gemma Malhi, who was the author of this report. Unfortunately, she's off sick today, but we do work very closely with each other. So hopefully I can do the report justice, Chair, as we go through. This is about the Invest to Deliver, the delivery plan reserve that we have in place and the spend against that. The fund was originally set up to pump prime key transformation initiatives based on the 3 themes of transformation as written in the report. So the first one, of course, being about moving our residents from crisis to prevention. So that's really important that we can get in early and help them to prevent them from reaching crisis. The second one was about inclusive growth, so to ensure that our residents can benefit from the growth that is coming to the city. And the third element, new ways of working and ensuring that we had a fit for purpose organisation. So an organisation that's modern, fit for the future, and can deliver on what the city is ambitious enough to deliver going forward. And so those were the kind of 3 strands of the transformation. And the money that was put aside from the delivery plan reserve was to ensure that we could deliver against those priority areas. So a number of business cases have been approved and the money's been used for some of that pump priming. We're now moving into implementation, and in the report you can see a number of reports that have been to Cabinet that are now looking for the funding to make the implementation happen on the ground. So the focus of the Programme Management Office that Gemma is key in running has been to do a number of things. One is to give clear assurance of delivery of the programme. So what we've been doing is making sure that behind the scenes there is a rigorous process of assurance for both CLT and Cabinet members to ensure that they are aware of all the risks associated with the delivery, etc. Absolutely working hand in glove with finance colleagues that are on the call today. So we work absolutely hand in glove. It's really important that it's not just about the delivery of the initiative, but it's about the savings also coming out. And members have mentioned a number of those areas today as part of the previous report. We're here to give you, this is an added layer of assurance that we are putting into the system to give both CLT members and Cabinet members assurance of that delivery of those savings, to bring up early risk signs as they emerge, so that we can put mitigating actions into place quickly to bring that saving back on track. And that's really an important mechanism. We're into month 4 or month 5 of that reporting, and it is really embedding itself into the organisation. And the third area is something that we've done is to set up something called the Invest to Deliver Board, and this is really quite important. So it's chaired by Sarah Pitt here, our Director of Finance, a Deputy Section 151 officer. So all of the expenditure coming through that delivery plan reserved, the due diligence goes through that group that is made up of myself, Sarah as the chair, and a number of other finance and other colleagues through the CPMO, where we scrutinise all the requests to that delivery plan reserve before agreeing it, and before that the money has been delegated, as you're aware, to Councillor Chatfield, the leader, the deputy leader, the Section 151, and our monitoring officer. So before they receive that, we will have gone through a series of due diligence to make sure that the programme that we are putting into place meets the requirements around the transformation, that we're absolutely tracking its progress, and then Sarah will agree the money as chair of that board before it goes through to those that the fund has been delegated to. It's really important to say that this fund is being used to bring in specialist resources as required on these programs. And as you can see, there's a list in the report. But to give you an example, for example, the reduction of families in bed and breakfast, for example, as one of the savings initiatives that's on that list, we would need to bring in specialist resources to make sure that we're supporting Julie in making sure that that saving can be delivered going forward. So that's just an example, but there are many others. So I've talked about the Investor Deliver Board, and then the programme is given traction. So Councillor Chatfield, Councillor Jones, as part of the Corporate Delivery Oversight Group, have oversight of the totality of the programme and the spend. The spend across the delivery plan reserve is included in your quarterly monitoring that you have in front of you, so you'll see that each quarter we are open and transparent about the costs associated with the transformation and what we're spending against the delivery plan reserve, and this was just to give you a bit more detail about what those things are achieving. So there is a list of items there. They are examples of the things that we are approving through that delivery plan reserve. Are there any other questions, Chair?
Members?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm really supportive of the Invest to Save initiative. The only thing that puzzles me is why did we draw down so much money when we've said that 6.3 million is unallocated, probably won't get allocated this year. Second, is it not possible that we could engage with other stakeholders, for example, the NHS, would probably be the best organisation to engage with in drawing down sort of like funding with them. For example, I remember in my early years here as a councillor, there's a really good report that went to Health and Social Care Opening Scrutiny Committee around falls, where it said that when, just because our colleague Councillor Barber drinks that before, where you have a fall, then it can have an impact on the pressures at the NHS coupled with the pressure of the City Council, and whether you could then invest in home adaptations. I think there was a few recommendations, and we continued that for about a year or two, but then basically we never followed that through with the home adaptations. I think there's a long-term saving for the council and NHS, whether there's some joint and partnership work that we can do, and that's just one example. But clearly there could be some work with the Westminster Police around CCTV, etc. The other thing that comes to my mind, I'm not sure if you could interpret it as inclusive growth and benefit to residents, because it was in the initial financial monitoring report around the electricity costs have gone up, so it's costing us an extra £500,000 to fund electricity. And I think there is a plan to bring more energy efficient the street lights, the LED lights, because they cost less in terms of electricity. But isn't this an initiative that we could use with Invest to Save, where we allocate a certain number of funds to replace some of the old archaic street lighting we've got, which costs us a considerable amount in electricity, coupled with the fact that everyone knows in a few weeks' time, a few months' time, there's going to be a huge increase in the cost of all the utilities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Would you like me to come back on those, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first item on the 6.3 million that's not yet been allocated, and yet we've drawn the money down, that is because we're absolutely clear about what's coming through the pipeline. And as you can see, there are a number of lists on that report that are coming through Cabinet, and we are aware that they are coming. So the other thing is that, as you will be aware, there's full council will approve and ratify the savings for the next year, for 22-23 and beyond, and so we will be putting into place a set of programmes to ensure delivery against those as well, so that money will be used against bringing in the right resources required to do that. So there are a number of those initiatives, and the member just who spoke, you also talked about the things relating to the NHS. Just to give you assurance on that, we are absolutely working hand in glove with partners. So to give you an example of that, the early intervention and prevention programme that will be coming through Cabinet is absolutely a joint initiative across not just the voluntary sector, not just the NHS, but the community and voluntary sector and the police, where we'll be looking at joint teams out in the community and what that will look like in terms of addressing the early intervention and prevention agenda going forward. So absolutely. I know you gave an example about Falls there, but there are many other initiatives where we're working jointly. So we will be looking for joint investment, but that doesn't mean that the council mustn't get its own house in order to deliver what it needs to do to make the savings that are necessary going forward. In terms of the inclusive growth area, I'm afraid on the electricity question, I can't answer the specifics, and I don't know if any of my colleagues, Rebecca or others, can do that. But if there is a specific question, I'd be happy to come back on it. But I don't know if there's anything specific, Becky, that you could highlight on the electricity, because I'm not close enough to that.
Only add to the having been through this before with movement to LED. It's often not as straightforward as changing the bulbs, because often the columns have to be changed as well, and that normally chucks out the business case. In other words, it takes an awful long time to get that saving back. Not to say that it shouldn't be done, but I would envisage that this would be done as part of the Route to Zero rather than through this transformation, because there's already a Route to Zero programme set up. So, but that's something I know we can get more information on if that's of help.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, just to say, Chair, that Route to Zero programme is also funded through this transformation element, so we can absolutely come back with some detail around that.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks, Rena, for the update. Agenda item 7, planned procurement activity report, which went to Cabinet, I believe, on the 8th of February.
No questions, Chair, but can the quarterly contract award schedule actually be a lot bigger with the words and the figures, because it's so difficult to read on the laptop? It's minute, and I'm blessed with good eyesight.
I will feed that comment back, Councillor Mahmood, and we'll try and get the font changed for next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Work programme?
Yeah, the work programme for noting, and is there any comments?
Just, yeah, well.
Question I asked before, Council.
Yeah.
Business charters.
Yeah, can we, what we'll have to do is bring that in if we can, in the March meeting, because the April, our April meeting is going to be on the 28th of April, fairly close to the local elections.
I think all we can do then, Chairman, is to agree the minutes, isn't it?
No, we can have a heavy agenda in March, and
yeah,
there's no need.
Yeah, what I'm thinking of is having a bigger agenda in March, and maybe
which is outside Purda.
Which is outside Purda, yeah. And or is it outside
No,
Purda?
Purda kicks in March.
Purda kicks in early.
Forgive me, when is the next meeting?
24th. It's within. Yeah, it's within. But if we have a heavy agenda in March, maybe we can do away with the April meeting. Yeah, but we can have a look at that in March.
Yeah.
And if we can include that, Councillor Mahmood's note in March. Yeah, it's a question in March. We'll include that in March. Okay. Oh, we've already agreed the date of the next meeting is the 4th of March. Request for calling, Councillor calling. Any petitions? No. Any other urgent business?
No.
No. Authority to chairperson officers? Great. Thank you, and thank you, officers, Tristan, members.
Yes, I think we've given them an hour back of their lives.
It's appreciated.
Thanks, everyone.